Hello, the purpose of this video is to introduce the structure of our proposed Medicaid Enterprise Modernization Strategy and begin to cover the first component in detail. We are building our overall modernization strategy around three main components: a diagnosis explaining the challenges inhibiting successful Medicaid modernization efforts, guiding approach tenets for dealing with the challenges that set the overall modernization direction, and a coherent action plan aligned with the guiding approach tenets to overcome the challenges. This video is the first in a series of videos to describe the diagnosed challenges. This content was elicited through interviews and reviews with dozens of states, vendors, and federal partners, then tailored to reflect Minnesota-specific scenarios. We divided the analysis into three layers. At the top, we have overarching governance, standardization, and regulation bodies. CMS comprises much of this layer, establishing and enforcing regulations, providing guidance through frameworks like MITA, the Medicaid IT architecture, and providing funding for delivery initiatives as well as ongoing operations. Within this structure, our state Medicaid enterprise is responsible for serving Medicaid members. We work within the governance structure of CMS and also the State of Minnesota Governor's Office. Supporting our Medicaid enterprise, an IT delivery model is in place that enables service delivery and the implementation of new IT changes. A separate agency within the State of Minnesota, MINIT, provides these IT delivery model services. We'll start by defining common terms for use throughout the series and digging in on typical IT delivery model challenges, then cover challenges in each subsequent layer, exploring how these issues are exacerbated as we move up. We start describing the software model, beginning with an idea or opportunity. In a traditional product sense, this is often a new product or a feature or enhancement to an existing product. In a Medicaid environment, many correlate this with entire systems or architectures. When it comes to software, these ideas are typically implemented through some form of delivery process, from planning and design through development and deployment. The process may vary depending on whether the software being implemented is COTS, SaaS, or custom, but will typically result in the creation of artifacts like alternatives analysis, delivery plans, software specification documentation, testing scenarios, automated pipelines, training and help materials, and ultimately deployed software made available to users. Most organizations must adhere to governance, regulatory, and compliance rules underlying these activities to remain compliant with regulations and limit risk, things like security, privacy, HIPAA, Section 508, etc. If we break down the components of this process into more general terms, people often refer to the ideas and opportunities as scope, the work needed to deliver the scope as activities, the artifacts created through the process, including the deployed software, as outputs, and the rules that must be followed at all times as mandatory compliance items. When external vendors are engaged to perform these responsibilities, it is common for the vendor payment to be contingent primarily based on the outputs, typically called out as deliverables in the contract. Organizations often spend a considerable amount of time worried about their scope and the corresponding cost and time associated with the activities required to deliver the scope, and the overall quality of the outputs, in some cases the quantity of the outputs. And they measure and place most of their management attention on the activities and the outputs. We tend to measure these things because measuring them is straightforward, and they are very visible. The truth is that we are doing these activities and producing these outputs for a reason. We have a current situation that we want to improve. Our goal is that the activities and outputs lead to an improvement in the future. The extent of future improvement is often measured by the outcomes achieved by the people who use the software solutions. Typical outcomes we can readily measure might be things like the satisfaction of our users, how fast we can respond to them, or a reduction in the time and effort required to perform business operations. These near-term outcomes are expected to lead to an improvement in the organization's impact, which is felt at a much broader level. For Medicaid, an impact might be an improvement in population health, a reduction in the overall cost of administration, or perhaps better equity of service to marginalized groups. Our primary goal is to increase our outcomes and impact with the lowest level of activity and output as possible. Let's talk about some of the challenges in IT delivery environments that prevent us from achieving this goal. Note, these issues are typical for most organizations and not intended to describe Minnesota-specific problems. We'll get to those in the next video. One of the most common and fundamental problems centers around the ideas. That most ideas originate from people seeing opportunities to improve outcomes in the current environment, that almost everyone has them, and that we have way too many of them, way more than we can feasibly turn into outputs. And critically, many of the ideas are solution requests that may not improve outcomes, especially when the desired outcomes are unclear, and we have a hard time figuring out which requested solutions are most likely to improve outcomes. Further, our governance and decision-making processes surrounding scope ideas involve many steps and many people, making it difficult to achieve alignment on clear priorities and often resulting in solution priorities being set by individuals with the highest authority level. In some cases, our scope may be required by external factors and can't easily be tied to a desired outcome improvement. For example, program mandates, regulatory or compliance changes, or expiring IT vendor contracts. Lastly, in highly risk-averse environments, attempts to ensure nothing bad happens can often lead to ensuring nothing different happens, which can limit the variety of idea options, making it to the starting point. For these and likely numerous other reasons, we frequently embark on IT initiatives with suboptimal scope ideas. For the ideas that do receive approval, we often face new challenges that hinder successful outcomes. A management focus on activities and outputs can prevent us from understanding whether the implemented idea will achieve the desired results. Often, the desired outcomes are neither defined nor clearly understood, and accountability for these outcomes is commonly ambiguous. Even when desired outcomes are well defined with clear ownership, we often cannot gauge the quality of a solution until it is implemented in a production environment and used by real users. Frequently, by the time we gather this feedback, the project is ended and the budget is overdrawn. Planning typically does not account for the ongoing care of outcomes after the initial delivery. Combining these outcomes issues with the uncertainty about the initial scope often leads to significant disappointment among stakeholders. The good news is that we can minimize these issues by reducing the amount of time between idea conception and the delivery of that idea to a user, otherwise known as lead time. Fortunately, our governance and execution capabilities are not designed to optimize for short lead times, often quite the opposite. Additionally, we've struggled to establish safe-to-fail, low-risk mechanisms which prevent staff from attempting rapid experiments. The subsequent result is lead times that are much too long to provide any reasonable mitigation to our scope and outcomes issues. Okay, let's take a step back and summarize the areas that seem to stand out as our most foundational challenges preventing outcome achievement through IT delivery. 1. Our inability to identify the scope that will generate desired outcomes. 2. A lack of clarity and focus on our desired outcomes. And 3. The long lead times delaying validated learning about outcome delivery. This concludes our IT delivery model challenges summary. Next, we'll build upon these issues to discuss how these challenges manifest in Minnesota's organizational environment.